The world ended on a rainy Tuesday, but the true darkness came later, with the silence. It had been 3 years since the virus collapsed society. The cities, once full of life, horns and lights, were now just tombs of concrete and twisted steel. The air had a permanent smell of dust and rust. There was no government, there were no laws. There were only the survivors and hunger. Sophia was one of those survivors. Before the collapse, she was an elementary school history teacher. She taught children about empires that fell and civilizations that were swallowed by time. Now, she herself lived in the ruins of one. Thin, with her face stained with soot and worn clothes that were several times larger than her body, Sophia walked through the shadows of the ruined buildings of a former metropolis. The wind howled through the broken windows like a ghostly wail. At the bottom of her torn backpack was her greatest treasure and, at the same time, her countdown, a single dented can of peaches in syrup. It was her last food. She hadn't eaten anything in 3 days. Weakness already made her hands tremble and her vision darken at the edges. She knew she needed to find a safe shelter before night fell, before the temperature plummeted to freezing. She found refuge underground in an old subway station. The darkness there was almost total, broken only by thin beams of light passing through the cracks in the ceiling, illuminating the dust suspended in the air. The silence was heavy, oppressive. Sophia sat in a corner, leaning against the cold and filthy tiles. Her hands, trembling, picked up the can of peaches. She ran her thumb over the cold metal. That would be her feast, perhaps her last. She was exhausted. The weight of loneliness at the end of the world was almost more unbearable than hunger. That was when she heard the sound, a faint groan, almost imperceptible, coming from the darkness of the tracks. Sophia's heart raced. Her survival instinct screamed for her to stay silent, to erase any sign of her presence. The world was now a place where humans hunted humans for a pair of old boots. But the sound came again. It was a groan of pain, a human cry, fragile and desperate. Against all the common sense that had kept her alive up to that point, Sophia stood up and walked toward the sound. Curled up between 2 rusted train cars, there was a man. He appeared to be over 60 years old, which by itself was a miracle in that new world. His clothes, which might have once been made of expensive fabric, were now filthy and torn rags. His leg was trapped under a fallen iron beam. His face was gray, his breathing shallow, a faint wheeze in his chest. His eyes were closed. He was dying, not from the injury, but from starvation, from pure weakness. Sophia stopped in front of him. She looked at the man. Then, she looked at the can in her hands. The math of survival was cruel and simple. If she gave away her food, she would die. That stranger, a man she had never seen, would probably die anyway. It was a waste. It was suicide. The voice of reason in her head screamed for her to go back to her corner and eat. She deserved it. She fought to get there. The old man opened his eyes with difficulty. The shine in them was fading. He looked at Sophia, but there was no fear, no demand. There was only a sad acceptance. He tried to raise his hand, as if apologizing for being there, disturbing the peace of her shelter. His dry lips moved, but no sound came out. In that moment, looking into that stranger's eyes, Sophia didn't see a competitor for resources. She saw a human being. She remembered who she was before the end of the world. She remembered the children she taught, the compassion she preached. If humanity loses empathy, what is left? We are just animals fighting in the mud. With her eyes full of tears, Sophia made her decision. She would not let the darkness of the world extinguish the light inside her. She sat next to the man. With difficulty, she pulled the ring of the peach can. The sound of the metal opening echoed loudly in the silence of the tunnel. The sweet smell of the syrup immediately filled the air. Sophia's stomach growled violently, a sharp pain that made her bend her body. Ignoring her own agonizing hunger, she dipped her fingers into the can, took a piece of peach, and brought it to the stranger's lips. He hesitated at first, confused, but when the taste of sugar touched his tongue, a spark of life seemed to return to his body. Sophia fed him, piece by piece, drop by drop of that precious syrup. She gave him the last food she had in the world. When the can was completely empty, the man took a deep breath, appearing to have recovered a breath of strength. He looked at the woman who, trembling with hunger, had just saved his life. What Sophia didn't know, what she had no idea of, was that the filthy and injured man next to her was named Arthur Sterling. Before the apocalypse, he wasn't just rich. He was the billionaire founder of the biotechnology corporation that, by accident, helped create the virus. But, more importantly than that, he was the only man on planet Earth who carried the cure's formula hidden in his mind. mind, and he was about to change that woman's destiny forever. The peach can was empty on the concrete floor, and the tunnel silence was broken by a deep sigh from Arthur. The sugar acted fast in his starving blood. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to regain a sharp gleam of intelligence and consciousness. He looked at Sophia, who was now shivering violently from the cold and, above all, a painful hunger. She had given her own life for him. With immense effort, Arthur forced the weight of his arms against the floor. The iron beam pinning his leg wasn't as heavy as it looked, just poorly positioned. Together, using Sophia's last reserve of strength and Arthur's sudden adrenaline, they managed to lift the rusted metal. Arthur pulled his leg out, letting out a muffled cry of pain. It was broken, but he was free. Arthur leaned his head against the cold wall, panting. He stared intently at Sophia. "Why did you do that?" His voice was hoarse, dry as sandpaper. "You gave me your last chance to live. In this world, that makes no sense." Sophia hugged her own knees, trying to contain her body's trembling. "If I let you starve to death in front of me," she answered, her voice weak, "I wouldn't be living. I would just be existing. And I'm tired of watching the world lose its humanity." A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on Arthur's lips. He coughed, clearing his throat, and then said, "What is your name, my child?" "Sophia." "Sophia, you were a teacher, weren't you? I can tell by the way you speak. What did you teach?" "History," she whispered, confused by the question. Arthur nodded. "Then you know what happens to empires built on greed. They fall. All of them. Ours fell 3 years ago. But the history they didn't tell you, Sophia, is about who pulled the trigger." Arthur pulled a small metallic object from inside his torn coat. It looked like an old flash drive, but made of a silver armored material, with a small red light blinking intermittently at the top. Sophia looked at the object, not understanding. "My name is Arthur Sterling," the old man said. Sophia's eyes widened. Her fatigue seemed to evaporate for a second. Arthur Sterling. Before the end, his face was in all the magazines and newspapers. The richest man on the planet. Founder of Sterling Biogenetics, the company that promised to cure all diseases with advanced gene therapy. He was a titan. And now, he was there, in the mud, dressed in rags. "Yes, I know what you are thinking," Arthur continued, his voice heavy with guilt. "It was my company. We didn't want to create a virus. We wanted to create the cure for cancer. We messed with autonomous genetic sequencing. A sample escaped the lab. The rest, well, you lived the rest. The world ended because I wanted to play God." Sophia felt a mix of anger and astonishment. The man responsible for the death of billions, for her hunger, for the destruction of her world, was right there. She had saved him. Fate was a cruel joke. But before the anger could take over, Arthur held out the hand holding the silver device. "I lost my family. I lost my world. I deserved to die under that beam. But the universe sent me you, Sophia, a woman who still has humanity. In the last days before the total collapse, I locked my team in an isolated underground lab, and we succeeded. We created the antidote." The word echoed in the tunnel. Antidote, the cure. The virus isn't just in the air, Sophia. It corrupted the soil, the water, the atmosphere. The planet is dying because the virus doesn't stop replicating. But here, he pointed to the object and then to his own head, is the genetic code for the antidote. It doesn't just cure the infected, it neutralizes the virus in the environment. It can clean the air. It can bring the earth back to life. Sophia looked at him in disbelief. "And why didn't you use it?" "Because my main lab was invaded. I had to flee. The atmospheric dispersion system, the only machine capable of spreading the cure across the planet, is in my personal high-security bunker, 150 kilometers from here, in the mountains. It's a place designed to withstand the end of the world. Inside there is food, pure water, energy for 100 years, and absolute protection. I was trying to get there when the tunnel collapsed and my leg broke." Arthur held Sophia's trembling hand. His hands were dirty with soot, but the billionaire's gaze was intense, burning. "Sophia, I can't walk anymore. My leg is ruined. Alone, I will die on the surface in less than 2 days. But if you take me there, if you help me get to the bunker, I swear by all that is sacred, I won't just give you food. The bunker will be yours. Everything I built, all the wealth left in this world. But, above all, we will give the future back to humanity. You saved my life with a can of peaches. Now, I am offering you the chance to save the world." A heavy metallic noise sounded in the distance of the tunnel. Footsteps, heavy and dragging. Someone, or something, had smelled the freshly opened can of food. The world was a dangerous place, and they were no longer alone. Sophia looked into the darkness of the tracks, then at Arthur's face, and finally at her own hands. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about hope. The sound of footsteps echoed on the tiled walls like beats of a funeral drum. They weren't animals. They were hunters, men and women who had lost the last trace of human sanity, driven purely by predation. The sweet smell of the peach syrup attracted them like sharks to blood. Sophia didn't think. She acted. Grabbing Arthur's arm, she placed it over her left shoulder. The man groaned in pain upon moving his broken leg, but swallowed the scream. With the strength that the recently ingested sugar had given her, Sophia dragged them into the shadows of the platform toward an old maintenance tunnel. As a former history teacher and longtime resident of the city, she knew the subway line maps by heart. They entered the damp darkness of the secondary ducts seconds before the hunters' flashlights swept the spot where they had been. 4 hours, they walked in the shadows, with dirty water ankle deep, the billionaire's weight crushing Sophia's shoulders. The pain in her muscles was agonizing, but the idea of the cure, of clean air again, acted as pure fuel in her veins. When they finally emerged on the surface, night had already fallen. The outside world was a gray and freezing desert, illuminated only by a pale, lifeless moon. Arthur's bunker was in the Shadow Mountain Range, 150 kilometers from there. On foot, in that condition, it would be impossible. But luck, or fate, seemed to have changed sides. At the highway exit, buried under the rubble of a collapsed gas station, Arthur pointed to an old military transport vehicle, powered by solar energy cells. The military had tried to contain the chaos at the beginning of the pandemic, but failed. The vehicle was abandoned. Arthur, with his knowledge of advanced engineering, and even trembling with pain, guided Sophia's hands to reactivate the vehicle's emergency power panels. The silent engine came to life. It was an engineering miracle. The journey lasted 2 days and 2 nights. It was a race against death. They crossed ghost towns, dodged barricades and convoys of looters, crossing the silent void that Earth had become. Arthur's condition was worsening rapidly. His fever was rising. The infection in his leg was spreading. He alternated between delirium and lucidity, whispering codes and scientific formulas into the void. Sophia drove non-stop, her eyes fixed on the horizon, repeating to herself, "We are going to save the world. We are going to save the world." On the morning of the 3rd day, the Black Stone Mountains appeared ahead of them. Guided by the coordinates Arthur murmured, Sophia drove the vehicle into a narrow valley, camouflaged by gigantic rocks. There were no doors. There were no buildings. Just a solid wall of massive granite. Arthur, with his skin pale as paper and his breathing failing, pointed a remote control from inside his coat. The mountain trembled. With a deep, heavy sound that made the ground vibrate, the stone wall began to split. A 30-centimeter thick steel door, hidden in the rock, slid slowly to the sides. A blinding, pure white light emanated from inside, cutting through the darkness of the apocalyptic world like a divine lighthouse. Sophia parked the vehicle and helped Arthur down. As they entered, the steel door closed behind them, sealing the outside. The sound of the wind disappeared. The biting cold was replaced by purified, clean, slightly heated air. The place looked like the interior of a spaceship. Immaculate white corridors, perfect LED lights, blinking computer terminals. "Welcome to the Ark," Arthur whispered, leaning against the cold wall of the corridor, letting his body slide to the floor. He had no strength left. Sophia was amazed. Behind glass doors, she saw the impossible. Hydroponic greenhouses glowing with ultraviolet light, full of red tomatoes, green lettuces, strawberries, apple trees. There were boxes and more boxes of bottled water. There was a kitchen with electric stoves. There were clean beds with white cotton sheets. It was paradise hidden beneath the earth. "The control room," Arthur panted, pointing to the end of the corridor. "The cure. We have to release it." Sophia ran to the end of the corridor with Arthur in her arms, until they reached a large circular room. In the center was a glowing main panel, connected to enormous ducts that went up toward the ceiling and the surface. It was the atmospheric dispersion machine. Arthur placed his hand on the panel. The computer requested biometric verification. The red light scanned Arthur's face and then his retina. Access granted. Initiating global purification sequence. The female computer voice echoed in the room, calm and serene. The floor began to vibrate as the gigantic machines awakened after years of sleep. The flash drive with the cure was inserted, but then the panel lights turned red. An alarm began to sound. "Security warning," said the computer. "External ventilation systems blocked by debris accumulation. To release the antidote, the manual emergency system must be activated on the surface." Arthur looked at the screen in shock. The mountain had suffered landslides over the last 3 years. The mountain's air vents were buried. There was no way for the antidote to get out. There was a maintenance hatch, hatch. But the temperature outside was now at extreme -degrees, the air was highly toxic, and the sensors indicated movement. The hunters had followed the vehicle's tracks. They had reached paradise. They had the cure. But to save the world, someone would have to leave that perfect shelter, face death outside, and pull the lever. And Arthur couldn't even stand up. Sophia looked at the food, at the water, at the promise of a safe life. She could stay there forever and survive. Or she could open the door. The red alarm blinked, painting Sophia and Arthur's faces with the color of blood and danger. On the screen, the pressurization system counter began to rise to critical levels. The cure was ready to be released, but it had nowhere to go. Arthur looked at Sophia with his eyes full of tears. Guilt crushed him. He shook his head, defeated. "Don't go, Sophia," he whispered. "The air out there is fatal. The hunters are on the slope. If you go out that hatch, you will die. Say, we have food, we have water, we survived. Let the world out there end." Sophia looked at the greenhouses glowing with life, at the promise of absolute safety. She remembered the cold, the torturous hunger, the days walking among the rubble. Everything she had ever wanted for the last 3 years was right there. Peace, rest. But then, she looked at her own hands, the same hands that opened the can of peaches. She remembered why she was alive. It wasn't to hide. If she stayed, she would be just like the monsters outside, consuming resources until the end. "The world didn't end from a lack of science, Arthur," Sophia said, her voice firm and resolute, as she walked to the emergency locker and put on a worn hazmat suit. "The world ended from a lack of sacrifice. I didn't come all the way here to watch the future from the front row. I came to plant it." Without looking back, Sophia opened the airlock door and began to climb the long metal ladder toward the surface. The cold was the first thing she felt when she opened the upper hatch. The wind howled like a wounded beast. The night on the mountain was an abyss of freezing darkness. Crawling through the toxic snow, Sophia saw the ventilation ducts. An avalanche had thrown tons of rocks over the exhaust grates, and, coming down the slope, less than 200 meters away, the hunters' flashlights swept the area, attracted by the sound of the alarm leaking from underground. Ignoring the fear and the burning in her lungs, which stung with every breath through the mask's old filter, Sophia ran to the emergency lever. It was jammed by a block of ice and stone. The hunters saw her. Guttural screams tore through the night, and the sound of gunshots echoed through the mountains. The bullets ricocheted off the metal of the hatch. Sophia didn't duck. She didn't run. Putting all her body weight, all her anger for what the world had become, and all her love for what it could be again, she pushed the lever. Her muscles screamed. The stone wouldn't give. A gunshot grazed her shoulder, tearing the suit. She screamed in pain, but didn't let go. With one last desperate effort, the lever gave way with a deafening metallic crack. The ground shook violently, and then it happened. An explosion of sound, like the breath of a god, erupted from the mountain. Gigantic columns of steam, glowing in a fluorescent blue tone, were shot into the sky with colossal force. The antidote rose like a beacon to the stratosphere, piercing the black clouds of pollution and death. The shockwave knocked Sophia into the snow. The hunters stopped, blinded by the blue light, dropping their weapons in pure astonishment. Wherever the blue mist touched, the air became clean. The smell of rot and ashes disappeared instantly. The night sky, hidden for 3 years, revealed the stars. Sophia took off her mask, risking everything. She drew in the air. It was pure. It was clean. It smelled like summer rain. It smelled like hope. In the months that followed, the world changed. The antidote spread through the winds, cleansing the continents. The earth breathed again. Arthur Sterling survived. With Sophia's help and using the bunker's technology, they began to gather the survivors. But this time, the new civilization was not built on greed or fear. It was built on empathy. Arthur gave up his entire empire. He was no longer the owner of the world. He was just one of its caretakers. In the center of the first rebuilt city, there are no statues of generals or billionaires. There is only a small bronze monument, the hands of a woman holding a can of peaches. An eternal reminder that the salvation of the world does not begin with great technologies, but with the ability to share what you have with those who have nothing. The apocalypse was not beaten by a billionaire. It was beaten by compassion. Sophia's story shows us that the greatest power that exists is empathy, and that is exactly what we need to spread in our own world before it's too late. If this story touched your heart and made you think about the value of small actions, please leave a like on this video. This helps YouTube deliver this message of hope to more people. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories that will move and inspire you. And before you go, tell me here in the comments, if it were your last meal, who would you share it with? Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.